The dust stirred in thick, silent clouds, hanging over the excavation site like a specter. Dr. Thomas Collins, a distinguished archaeologist known for unearthing long-buried relics, crouched beside his team, brushing away the ancient soil that had lain undisturbed for centuries. The dig had been routine, almost mundane. They'd uncovered fragments of pottery, worn tools, and other traces of human life, each carrying its own significance, but nothing close to groundbreaking. But on this day, the seemingly ordinary afternoon would yield an extraordinary discovery. It began with a sharp shout from one of his assistants. Dr. Collins turned, his heart thudding in his chest as he rushed over. The assistant knelt beside a partially revealed metal surface, caked in dirt and thick rust, yet unmistakable in shape, a helmet. More than just any helmet, it was a knight's helmet, with intricate designs barely visible under the centuries of decay. As the team began to carefully clear the surrounding earth, they realized the full armor was intact. A whole suit of armor, standing like a sentinel of history, waiting to share its secrets. Dr. Collins's hands trembled slightly as he examined the suit. The weight of history pressed down upon him. He had the distinct feeling that this armor was more than just a relic of a forgotten knight. Something about it felt alive, as if it carried an unseen burden. The thought lingered, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. The knight's armor had weathered the years remarkably well. Although rusted and dulled, its ornate details were still discernible, hinting at a level of craftsmanship reserved for only the most distinguished warriors. Collins moved closer, his gloved hands tracing the designs etched into the metal. The team watched in silence as he worked, all eyes on the knight's visor, half open, as if inviting him to peer inside. Collins adjusted his gloves, took a steadying breath, and carefully tilted the helmet forward. The visor revealed something that defied all expectation, a brittle piece of parchment, tucked within the confines of the helmet as if it had been intentionally hidden. He froze, his mind racing. The parchment had been shielded from time itself, preserved by the darkness within the armor. Slowly he drew the paper out, handling it as if it might crumble at any moment. His hands shook as he unfolded the delicate sheet, revealing faded writing in a language he did not immediately recognize. The ink, though faint, was still legible, a testament to the craftsmanship of its creator. The first few words stirred something deep within him. This was not a mere letter. It was a message, a story, and a warning. Collins's heart raced, an inexplicable sense of dread washing over him. He read the words again, struggling to make sense of their fragmented meaning. The language was old, ancient even, and the handwriting bore the urgency of someone who had written it under duress. His eyes traced each line, every carefully crafted stroke, each a thread weaving into an ominous tale. But before he could make sense of it all, he realized he had to keep this discovery to himself at least until he understood its full meaning. "Sarah," he called softly to his assistant. She approached, eyes filled with curiosity, but he quickly folded the parchment, slipping it into his jacket pocket. "Just some old writing," he said dismissively, his voice betraying a hint of unease. She studied him, a flash of suspicion crossing her face, but he quickly turned his attention back to the armor, attempting to distract her. That evening, Dr. Collins lay awake in his tent, his mind racing with the implications of what he had discovered. The faded words, the ominous warning, it all felt larger than life, a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit into any known historical narrative. By the dim light of a lantern, he carefully unfolded the parchment once more, poring over each word, his mind straining to decipher its meaning. Hours slipped by as he lost himself in the text, each sentence pulling him deeper into a tale of betrayal and dark intentions. He was able to make out only fragments, but they hinted at a conspiracy to overthrow a king, a plot that, if true, could rewrite entire sections of history. The author, whoever they were, had taken great pains to conceal this message, hiding it in a place no one would dare to look. The more he read, the more convinced he became that this wasn't just a forgotten story. This was a hidden truth, a part of history that someone had tried desperately to erase. The night wore on, but sleep eluded him. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the knight's helmet, the parchment, and the warning it contained. By dawn, he was resolved. He couldn't do this alone. He needed someone who could help him understand the language, someone he trusted implicitly. Later that day, Dr. Collins contacted Dr. Emily Harris, an esteemed linguistics professor and his close friend. The urgency in his voice was unmistakable as he explained the basics of his discovery, withholding details but making it clear that he needed her expertise. She agreed to meet him at a small cafe near the excavation site. When Dr. Collins arrived, he found himself fidgeting, his mind racing through the possibilities of what they might uncover. When Dr. Harris entered, her expression was a mix of curiosity and concern. They exchanged pleasantries, but it wasn't long before he slid the parchment across the table, watching her reaction intently. Dr. Harris's eyes widened as she unfolded the paper, her fingers tracing the faint words with reverence. This is extraordinary, Thomas, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the cafe's clatter. But the language, it's a blend of Old English and something else. Something I haven't seen before. Dr. Collins nodded, the weight of his discovery pressing down on him. Emily, I think this is more than just history. This could change everything we know about that period. They agreed to keep the find a secret for now, understanding the potential implications. This was no ordinary parchment, it was a gateway to a story that could alter centuries of historical knowledge. As they left the cafe, both felt an unspoken sense of foreboding, as if their lives had shifted onto a path from which there was no return. Back at the dig site, the atmosphere buzzed with rumors about the knight's armor. Whispers of ancient curses, hidden treasure, and secret histories spread among the team like wildfire. Sarah, Doctor. Collins's assistant, grew increasingly suspicious of his behavior. Her questions met with vague answers and evasive smiles. Meanwhile, Dr. Collins and Dr. Harris had set up a small workspace in a rented storage unit nearby, safe from prying eyes. Here, they could work on deciphering the parchment in peace. Books and reference materials were scattered across the table, each one a potential key to unlocking the language on the brittle paper. Days turned into nights as they pored over the text, piecing together the cryptic language line by line. Bit by bit, the parchment's message began to unfold. It spoke of a high-ranking noble who had betrayed his king, a treasonous act so grave that the knight had sworn to hide the truth, even at the cost of his life. The message warned of alliances and dangers, conspiracies that could unravel kingdoms. As they delved deeper, Collins and Harris could feel the weight of history bearing down on them. This isn't just a historical document, Dr. Harris said, her voice barely concealing her excitement. This is a story of betrayal that could have changed the fate of nations. Their breakthrough brought exhilaration, but also unease. It was clear that someone had wanted this story erased from history, and Collins and Harris were beginning to understand why. They decided to secure the document in a safe, hidden within their storage unit, locking it away whenever they weren't actively working on it. But even with these precautions, Collins couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. One night, as Collins walked back to his tent, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Be careful who you trust it read." The words chilled him to the core, echoing the warning on the parchment itself. He glanced around, heart pounding, but saw only the shadows cast by the setting sun. Despite the growing sense of danger, Collins and Harris pressed on, determined to unlock the full story. But their secrecy couldn't last forever. One day, Mark, a rival archaeologist known for his cutthroat tactics, showed up at the site, his demeanor too casual, his questions too probing. Collins and Harris exchanged wary glances, each silently agreeing to keep their discovery close to the vest. But Mark's interest didn't wane. Over the next few days, he made increasingly bold attempts to pry into their research. Collins felt his patience wearing thin, but he knew they had to be careful. If Mark learned the truth, the entire dig and the discovery could be compromised. Late one evening, as Collins and Harris reviewed the final sections of the parchment, they heard footsteps outside their storage unit. Before they could react, the door was flung open, and there stood Mark, his face twisted with greed. "Hand over the parchment, Collins," he demanded, his voice dripping with hostility. "You have no idea what you found." Collins's grip tightened on the fragile paper, his instinct screaming to protect it. "This isn't something you can take, Mark," he replied, his voice steady. "You don't understand the gravity of this discovery." Just as Mark took a threatening step forward, a figure appeared behind him, Officer Reynolds, a local policeman Collins had discreetly alerted about their suspicions. Within moments, Mark was subdued, his greed melting into fear as he realized he had been outmaneuvered. The encounter left Collins and Harris shaken but resolute. They knew they had to secure their find and report it to the authorities. The following morning, they presented their discovery to a panel of historians, unveiling a story that would shake the foundations of historical knowledge. The parchment was hailed as a revelation, a piece of history that had been hidden for centuries. Scholars and historians were captivated, drawn to the tale of betrayal and conspiracy. The story of the forgotten knight became an instant sensation, sparking debates and discussions across academic circles. For Collins and Harris, the recognition was bittersweet. They had unlocked a secret that had lain buried for centuries, but they knew their journey wasn't over. History had more to offer, and they were determined to continue their search for forgotten truths. As they looked out over the dig site, A sense of awe filled them both. They had uncovered more than just artifacts, they had uncovered the very soul of history, a story that would echo through the ages.